Okay, so I'm really excited to get to talk to you guys about your new book. So, Malcolm, why don't you give me, the background? How did this happen? How did this collaboration happen?
Yeah, a few years ago, I got a call from Georgia's Department of Early Care and Learning informing me about their pre-K program and their pre-K program requiring a Georgia author to write a book. And I was very privileged to get that opportunity to be an author for one of the books. So that year went by, and then the next year I did another. And then I got this great opportunity to attend a Teacher of the Year appreciation lunch where I met Coy. And at that teacher appreciation event, they informed me that before I did the books for Georgia Pre-K, Coy had done a few books for Georgia Pre-K, and that we should collaborate. That's inside of the book, too.
Collaborate.
Collaborate to see if we can do something together, just as a means to continue to encourage our young students in Georgia. So from that initial meeting, we began to have conversations, and thankfully we were able to come together and create Every Amazing Story.
Yeah, it was a great adventure, too.
Yeah.
It was we got to really know each other and become good friends, and all the things that you would hope that would happen actually happened. You know, we're on a mission now to actually hang out in real life.
Yeah.
Every time we talk, we're like, okay, so when are we going to really hang out and be friends? You know?
Yeah.
That sounds like fun. So, Coy, talk to me, why children's books? Why are you guys, there's so many things, with your platforms that you can do, so many different nonprofits that you could support, but why children's books and the passion for literacy, especially in young people?
I think I wrote my first children's book probably 15 years ago, and it was just a project. I wanted to be an author. It seemed like a lot easier of a journey to write a 30-page illustrated book than 500 pages, so I kind of decided to go that route. But, the world is a winding place, and it leads you where it will. And so I followed the signs, and it kept leading me back to kids. I will say that, like, if I'm at Thanksgiving dinner, I would much rather sit at the kids' table and talk about fun, imaginative things than I would at the adults' table talking about how much my knee hurts or whatever else. So I'm kind of always a kid at heart. But to be completely honest, at some point, I learned too much about what's going on with kids in our country and specifically in our state to not be a part of the positive. And so I've just been dedicated to that mission ever since, and wanting to be able to make our country a better place with our education system and being involved. And also, once you learn the statistics on 0 to 7 and how important that foundation is for a successful human, I really wanted to dive into particularly that age range and start writing, books for kids in that realm. So, and I love being creative in very different ways. So this is really outside of my box. It requires a lot of critical thinking skills. It requires me to be imaginative and creative in ways that really push me in different directions. And I think it keeps me on my toes creatively. So I love the process, and I love the end result and what it does to giving back to students.
It's really awesome. So, Every Amazing Story, tell me about it. What's it about? How did you come up with the concept?
Well, we started off, and I submitted a few book ideas to Coy, and he basically told me he did not like any of them.
That's not true.
So we got together, and we went through this really organic process trying to figure out what is speaking to us. And ironically, the process of collaborating and working on a book together was what came to the forefront. So we decided to take a very creative but literal approach to creating a book and exemplifying that in Every Amazing Story to give to kids so they can see what the process is like.
Of writing a book.
Of writing a book.
Because we both looked at each other and we said, what's the one thing we have in common other than being from Georgia? And we were like, we both write books. And we were like, well, why don't we write a book about how to write a book? And that's what this book is about. It's about writing an amazing story and the process that goes along with it. And and it turned out awesome. I mean, I couldn't be more excited and happy about. The illustrations are really amazing. The layout of the book and, you know, kind of the takeaway at the end is very inspiring. And so, you know, and Malcolm brought a lot of great ideas. He's trying to, like I was like somehow or another
my first idea, I'm going to say it. My first idea was a sticker idea. I thought it was great. Stickers on a lunchbox, and the stickers bring out different personality traits. And that was, Coy said, well, let's see if we can, let's try something else. He was very diplomatic about it. But he was right. I think the story that we got to is by far better than anything that was thrown out there initially. I mean, just think about a book that is really walking pre-K students through the process of writing. So you're approaching or attacking some of our literacy crisis with Every Amazing Story, because it is encouraging students to read and write. Would you add to that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like it's, at the end of the day, if we could have wrote a list of boxes that we wanted to check off, we would have checked off all those boxes.
Yeah.
How long did it take to write this? What was the process of, you know, working together and doing this? I've never, you know, I write a lot, obviously, but I've never written a book. I've never written a children's book. So how long does it take to do? What was the process? You know, how did you guys, you know, work together to bring this to fruition?
We would meet at my house. We don't live that far from each other, actually. And so we would meet at my house most times. And once we kind of settled on the idea of let's write a story about how to write a story, we then would kind of work it out beautiful mind style on, I'm a pretty visual person, so we kind of, you know, came up with a story arc, and then would be, well, that's a really cool part of the story, is to talk about how the actual story needs a story arc. And then we kind of realized we're writing a story within a story. And then, you know, there were two really interesting things that happened with the collaboration of this, was that Malcolm was very concerned and that the book made sense. And I was very excited about being creative.
Yeah.
You know, so those two things were a really great combination, because, you know, we've told this a little bit before, but one of the things was, like, Malcolm's like, let's read it from the top again. And I'm like, okay, we just read it from the top, you know? And he was like, no, like, we'll read it from the top again. And that's something that I will for now do for the rest of my life, is because every time we would read it from the top, we would smooth it out a little bit more, and we would catch some kind of little barb or a twisting of words or something that wasn't there. And so as we read it from the top continuously, every time it made more sense, and it was like, okay, this is a fluid thing, whereas I was really wanting for this one section to just be awesome. And so so there was a process that we both brought our A games to the table and our personalities to the table, but we were both understood the team effort. Like, being in a band is a lot like being in a team, and being in sports is a lot like being in a team. And nobody wants to be told that they're, you know, that's not good or anything like that. So we brought this kind of like very collaborative, open-minded spirit to it, and with empathy. And I think at the end of the day, with the best of ourselves came out. And not only that, we had a really good time joking about what could be and what couldn't be in the story, and getting to know each other and telling stories. And, you know, both being from the South, we had a lot of, you know, funny high school stories that we would, you know, talk about in between writing the book and stuff like that. So getting to know each other, as well as this process of showing up, visualizing it on a board, going back and forth, and starting from the top, it really paved it to where when we finally read it from the top the last time, we were like, I think we're done, dude. I think this is awesome, you know? This is Every Amazing Story.
Well, we were honest, open, and transparent. So we weren't afraid to be authentic with each other.
True.
If we were respectful, that was a huge piece of it. So if Coy did not like something, it was respectful in how he delivered, that maybe we could do it differently. And I feel that I did the same. And that helped out a lot, because it got us through things quicker. We didn't waste a lot of time trying to make each other feel good about something. We just got to the point, and we tried to communicate all of that effectively. I was smiling as he was talking, because I vividly remember going through certain scenes of the book and being like, no, I'll read it over. Then I close my eyes and I listen. Like, what are you doing? I said, well, I got to feel the story, you know? And we do it over and over and over and over. And even when the illustrations came back, I didn't realize Coy had dimples at one point. And I look at him and I say, you have dimples, man? And you know that, I think it's those moments. It's kind of reminds me of like, everyone thinks the football games are the best part, but it's actually the bus ride or the flight over to wherever we're playing that becomes the things that stick out most when you reflect on it.
Yeah.
See, he's like,
Absolutely. But today it's all covered up. You can't see.
Yeah, then he was nicknaming me Dimples for a while, and I was like, that ain't gonna last, dude. I grew up in a small town where everybody's got nicknames, and mine ain't gonna be Dimples.
It's not gonna be dimples. So obviously literacy is important. People need to be able to read. They need to be able to understand what they're reading. But you know, as somebody who I can't remember a time that I did not love a story, that I did not love to read. It is, you know, being able to just immerse yourself in another world for a while, and get away from, you know, your life for as long as you're in this world is just something that you just cannot replace for me. And I've tried to pass that love of reading on to my kids. And as a mother, I've realized how hard that is. You know, they read well, they comprehend well, but they just don't like to pick up a book for the fun of it, which breaks my heart. So, you know, how do you guys try to bring a love of reading to kids versus just, oh, we must read because reading is important?
It's interesting for me, honestly, because I read a lot, but I read a lot of articles. I don't necessarily read books. I think I feel like I have a very intense imagination, so I'm not necessarily looking for someone else's imagination to inspire me from their stories. But I love reading about other people's lives. So I do read, you know, autobiographies and biographies and a lot more nonfiction. But I read throughout the day about all of these different things that I'm interested in, whether it's new music technology, whether it's, you know, health stuff that's going on. I have these different fields. I'm really into science a lot, so I'm reading all of these different articles. So I read a lot, but I don't necessarily read books. So I think one of the things is to encourage kids to just read, and it's not always about just like taking a big book and reading it from beginning to end. You know, if you like reading magazines, then that's great, read. If you like reading articles, you know, that are on your iPad or, you know, or however you like to read, then whatever inspires you. But it's more just the process of reading when you actually get down to it, and retaining the information and being a curious, information-seeking person through words is really where the kind of all of the synapses come together. And so, so I mean, I kind of think as far as reading goes, one of the things that I try to encourage is, like, we both have younger kids, and I'm just trying to encourage them to read everything from the menu at the restaurant to, you know, if there's something that's like a magazine that comes in that has a chair on the front, and they're like, ooh, that's a cool chair. I'm like, okay, let's find the chair in the magazine and read about it, you know? So yeah, I think it's just encouraging as much as you can that there's not necessarily one specific way to read. That reading is all around you, and at least that's my take on it, you know?
Yeah, I think we have to continue to challenge the cultural narrative surrounding reading and literacy as a whole. I have done some partnerships with, obviously, Georgia Department of Early Care and Learning. I've done some with the Sandra Duncan Dill Center in Millersville, Georgia, where they have a traveling tale trail where they put signs out along trails. So if you're hiking outside, you can actually read a book as you hike. As you get to each checkpoint, you get a new page of a book. I know DeKalb has a lot of educator resources. And as Coy was just mentioning, I think if we turned it into a more social event, like I joined a book club when I was in college, and that kind of sped up or enhanced my love of reading because it wasn't an isolated experience. I would read a chapter and then I can communicate with somebody about it. So I think if we start introducing reading in atmospheres that it's a little different than we've done in the past, I think then we invite kids and younger audience to engage with it, because at this point we're competing with very social activities. They are playing video games with other people. You know, they're on social media communicating with other people, but when we ask them to read, they're by themselves. Well, I think if we challenge that notion, then we get a step closer. That would just be one thing, and if I had to continue to talk about it, we'd be here for a while.
I know how you feel. So, let's touch briefly on Georgia Pre-K Week. It's been around for the last 15 years. How important is it to have programs like this to just continue to enhance the love of learning altogether? Because, starting kids off so young, they're just sponges. They absorb everything. They can absorb, other languages faster than adults. They're absorbing everything. So how vital are programs like this to, I guess, encourage a love of learning, a love of reading in kids as they're starting out their educational journey?
Yeah, I learned that 1 in 300 students in under-resourced communities have access to age-appropriate books. So even if we want them to fall in love with reading, they don't have the tools necessary in the household to practice. Well, this relationship with Georgia Pre-K ensures that every child who's a part of the Pre-K program will have an age-appropriate book at home to build their at-home library and practice the exercise to become proficient readers. To me, that's what's most important. That's what I love about it. This book is at no expense to these families or to these communities. All they have to do is be a part of Georgia's Pre-K programs, and they get a book. That matters substantially. And for that reason, I'm happy to be a part of this relationship.
Yeah, and one of the things that we both travel around the country being a part of different states, and the fact that Georgia has such a vibrant pre-K program with the lottery being involved is it's one of the things that you kind of don't know what you don't have until you go somewhere else and realize like what else is out there. So the idea that Georgia is so taking care of its pre-K programming, and we as a state think that early learning is very important, and we put that in motion and have for a very long time, for 15 years now, obviously because of Pre-K Week. So it's a very proud moment for me to realize like we as a member of people, as a state, all believe that this is something that should be very important. And then we do things like the Pre-K Week and put it into effect. So I'm proud to be a part of Georgia, and proud that we established this kind of relationship with our pre-K and our kids in such a great way. It's awesome.
You guys read this book to kids yet? If you have, like, what's been their reaction? Do they love it?
Yeah, I read it to my daughter. The first copy came in, which is like a test copy, and my youngest daughter is 7 years old, and so I said, "Do you want to read the book?" And she said yes, and I was a little concerned because it's a story about a story, and there was this moment where Malcolm said, "We're writing a story about a story," and I was like, I mean, that's kind of like 101 when you're writing stories, is to like, don't do things like have a story inside of a story inside of a story inside of a story.
Right.
So, but my daughter was on the couch. She was reading the book, and then about like 2 pages left, she turns and looks at me and goes, "Is this a story about a story?" And I was like, "Yes!" She got it. And so I think so far, this is my 7th children's book, and I'm not sure if it's the newest one, and that's why she wants to read it more often. But she is constantly talking about plot and character and conflict resolution and all of these items that are in the book. So I feel like, just as a dad who created something, who got to share it with my own daughter, that this book is coming, it's working, and you see her light bulb, because she starts talking about, we can be the characters in the story, you and I'll be the characters. And before, she would have never really have talked about characters per se, and when we're talking about, like when we watch movies now, and I can ask them, so what's the plot of this movie? She'll go back and say, well, the main character was doing this, and then it kind of got here, and then, and then it resolved like this. So that's been really exciting, because once you start taking stories and breaking them down into where there's similarities, like there's characters, there's plot, there's conflict resolution, and these different things. You start seeing this, it kind of, the world of stories starts becoming, smaller and together and more capable of understanding them as a whole, which is one of my favorite things that's happened in my life, is to be able to understand the art of storytelling and the art of watching or reading a story, and how the art of that is able to be encapsulated in the human experience and in your body,
Yeah, I have a 5-year-old son by the name of Oakley, and I read him the book, and when I got to the end, he said, "So, you and Coy are the author? You wrote the words?" I said, "Yes, that's correct." He said, "Well, I want to be an author. What about the pictures? Did you draw the pictures?" I said, "Well, Dad's talent has limitations." He said, "Well, I want to draw the pictures too." I said, "Well, they call that an illustrator." And he said, "Just like in the book." So I think what Corey and I are explaining is that through telling this story about a store, we open up kids' minds to understand stories at a basic level, so at some point they can consume them at a more grand level that allows them to interact with the narratives of the world in a meaningful way. And I think that's really cool.
It's really cool. So, for folks who might not have a kid registered with this and want to get a copy of the book, how can they do that?
It will be available on coybowls.com, and we haven't really talked about this, so we have to figure that part out. Actually, we're getting there. So it'll be available at coybowls.com. I'm sure Malcolm will probably have copies on his website, and we're going to try to get it on Amazon as well very soon. That's all in the making. It feels like we just got finished with the book, and then, as creatives, you get very inspired by the creative process, and then you're like, oh yeah, we've got to
write another one.
We got to write another, or we got to get this one to where it's available to the public,
Right.
So yeah, it'll be available on our websites and things like that.
Great. That's great. Is there anything else you guys would like to add that we haven't talked about your book, about the process, and about Georgia Pre-K Week?
I'd add, for those who want to support students, please ensure that they have books and get out and read at your local elementary schools. You in the community make a difference.
Yeah, and the other thing that I've found really interesting as far as learning more about this, that if you're not a strong reader, then it's not about being perfect. The whole idea of and I can't stress it enough, is that it's about sitting down with a book with a kid in your lap and looking at the pictures and talking about what's going on. And as they get older, they will learn how to read. And it's the process of sitting down and talking about the pages and talking about, there's a bird, look, it's the same bird over here. That goes so far with getting kids accustomed to having books where they're not a foreign object. So, if anybody's reading this, or if anybody's watching this and you're uncomfortable, you didn't really have someone read to you, then don't worry about it. Grab a book, sit down, and just start making up stuff and talking about it. And as the kid progresses in their life, they'll figure it out. And we've got good teachers that are teaching them that. But the main thing, and all the studies show it, it's just about sitting down with a book, and it all starts there. Without that, then it's not nearly as fruitful. So there is no right way to do this. There is no perfect way. And if it's something that you want your kid to be a strong reader and somehow you're not, then there's no shame in that. Just sit down with them, enjoy the time together, talk about the bird, and and as it progresses, your kid will end up reading the book to you, and then that's fine. So,
man, that is,
yeah, find your way. Just keep showing up. That's the most important thing that I've learned in this whole thing. Being a parent, being a mentor in a kid's life is really hard. There's a lot of emotions that go on, but it's all about just continuously showing up. That's all they want, is for somebody to be there for them. So if you want them to be a strong reader, just keep showing up and reading with them somehow, however that makes you, however that works for you, and it'll all work out.
Beautifully stated.
All right.
Beautifully stated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you
Buddy,
so much
that was
for your
awesome.
time today. I'll virtually high five both of you here. But thank you for your time today. This was really cool. And keep doing what you're doing. I mean, I remember when my kids were little, they'd bring me books I'd have memorized, and they would have them memorized, and they'd read to me read to me because they were two, but they would, it's so important. And what you guys are doing, cannot be understated enough how important it is to encourage kids, even if they don't like to, like I do, immerse myself in the fictional world, just read. It's something we all need to be able to do. So thank you so much for all your work in that.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, cool. I have no idea when this is going to air, but I'll send you links when it does. And I didn't know I was going to be part of the scene. Otherwise, I would have dressed a little more for our family.
All good. I like
So-
your shirt.
Thank you so much. This is an Edelman. You can't see the back. It's an Edelman.
No,
I got Edelman
no,
and
they
Gronk.
may not like
and-
that in Georgia, but hey.
No, they don't.
Yeah, so-
They don't.
Yeah.
So
And I deal with
they
that
know
a
they know
lot.
Malcolm Mitchell is a Georgia player, not a Pats player. For me, it's all about the Pats. So,
Respect.
but all right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate it, Malcolm. It was very nice to see you again. Coy, so nice to meet you. I'm really, truly a huge fan of Zach Brown Band. I've listened to that first CD so many times. CD, that's how old I am. But it doesn't even work anymore. So,
Yeah.
but
Awesome.
thank you. I appreciate it. And you guys have a wonderful day. Enjoy this week.
All right,
Yes,
you too.
you too.